Jenny Tebbutt, and I'm from Raising Achievement. I started out as an undiagnosed person with ADHD, and it really coloured my educational experience. And it wasn't until I was 40 that I learned that I had inattentive type ADHD and the impact that that had had on my education. We also went on to have children later when I was married, and I found out that our son had both dyslexia and ADHD. By that stage, I was a teacher, and I realised quite quickly that the needs of children with learning difficulties aren't catered for at school. And I guess I had two choices. One was to sort of complain and try and get something done. And the other was to maybe become a specialist, get stuck in and try and do something about it. And I chose the latter. And it was a very interesting journey for me. Our son ended up, he was actually, I noticed really early on that he had difficulties and differences. Basically, from the time he was able to walk, he often would go wandering and get lost. And I can remember waking up one morning at 7 o'clock and he was gone. And I panicked. We were on a farm, we had rivers, troughs, all those sorts of things. And just sort of getting to the point of not knowing what to do next, I saw two figures wandering in the distance. Now, our young boy had actually got up, got on his two-wheeler bike with trainer wheels and cycled down to the cowshed to see his dad. Just so scary. We would also find him on the apex of roofs. He loved to survey the world from great heights. So it was pretty easy to see that he was a different sort of child, you know, and one of those who liked to climb. He went off to school, kindergarten, and within a few weeks, the kindergarten teacher was saying to me, Jenny, your son's going to need a good wife. And I thought, what does that mean? And basically what it meant was that he went round from activity to activity and left a trail of destruction behind him. And somebody had to go round and tidy up after him. Now, he had a couple of saving graces. He actually had personality plus, and he was one of those cute kids that everybody loved. And he also had a sense of humour, and that actually came out as a toddler as well. So he actually got away with a lot. But by the time he went to school, he was an October baby, and by Christmas, the very experienced class teacher was saying to me, Jenny, he's just not making his milestones. And I remember saying to her, look, no matter, I'm a good primary trained teacher. At the time, I prided myself in my ability to teach reading, and I used to write on my CVs that was a strength. And I remember saying to her, look, I'll just get stuck in over the holidays. I'll do some work with him, and I'm sure it will be fine. And I did all that and into term one, and it wasn't fine. And I realised then that he had some kind of learning difficulty. Now, it wasn't long before somebody said to me, have you heard of SPELLED? Now, I hadn't heard of SPELLED, but what they said that they would do was assess your child, determine if they had a learning difficulty, and if they did, a specialist program would be developed. And that sounded like a good idea to me. We were trained as teachers to have a sort of comprehensive assessment, like a pre-test, do a quality intervention and a post-test. And so that was the path we took. He was actually diagnosed with dyslexia very quickly, and some people had already started throwing around the idea of ADHD. Now, I didn't know about my ADHD at that stage, and I have to say I didn't really like the idea of it. I didn't want to medicate, and I thought that if we have a good structured program, a good homeschool partnership, and we address all his learning needs, that everything would be fine. And I have to say, sadly, I was wrong. I now actually recognise that when we have children who've got learning difficulties, we actually have to look at the diagnosis part. We have to look at social, emotional, behavioural, as well as educational. And I call that a multimodal approach. And when we take a multimodal approach, things actually work fine. But I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit. I really just wanted to give you a background of where I come from and why I'm so passionate about supporting parents. Now, when I was going through this journey, there wasn't much information. There weren't coordinators, there weren't specialists, and the organisations were few and far between. And we got our boy diagnosed, and as I said, he was diagnosed with dyslexia very quickly, and we chose to ignore the ADHD. We were actually forced to look into that further in his teenage years, often with ADHD. Often with ADHD, it can exacerbate in teenage years. So I just became so passionate about this area of education. And I often say I'm really just a mum who wanted to support their child through school and develop programs and resources to support him. And I realised very quickly that as he went through the school, that things weren't in place for him. Now, the other thing that was really quite interesting is I ended up becoming involved with SPEL, both locally and nationally. I was on the national executive for SPEL New Zealand for a few years, and I also worked with ADHD. I got a specialist qualification in teaching literacy, and I also, that was through Massey University, and I also did the SPEL teacher training and became a trainer for them for a number of years. And interestingly, I would say that it took me 15 years before I felt I could call myself an educational consultant. And I think that's a real surprise to some people.